what the keys are to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Got an interesting topic today. I want to talk about the new draft picks and how they seem very similar to some 49ers former players. And it's normal for players to be compared to players of the past, but I think there's some direct correlations and comparisons that can give us an idea of how the 49ers are building their defense. Because I think that's where the key similarities come through for sure, is on the defensive side of the football. Of course, the 49ers spent a lot of draft capital on defense, so it's the easiest one to kind of examine and translate into, good knowledge. And I think the 49ers have done a pretty good job of addressing needs in the draft. But when you start getting into it, you start finding some definite characteristics that compare and correlate different players to each other. And I think if you look deep enough, you can find some pretty cool, things that are similar to how the 49ers have done defense in the past. Now, one of the things that I have been thinking about a lot is when Kyle Shanahan was talking about having Robert Saleh back in the building, he, of course, said the first thing was, it's like nothing has changed, right? It's like he was always there. He's back, and it just feels right. But he also has alluded to them building this defense together. In 2017, they took over a 49ers roster that was depleted minus some parts. And they had to build a defense completely the way that they wanted. They had taken a thought process of running a cover three, running Pete Carroll style of defense, a Legion of Boom theory defense, something that's ran by Dan Quinn and Gus Bradley. And they wanted to kind of take that and make it into their own. And you've seen them do that. They drafted players that were very similar to what the Seattle Seahawks had, right? They're drafting these big corners who are long, and we've seen them do that a lot, right? Ahkello Witherspoon. They ended up, going out and eventually getting Richard Sherman. They wanted to bring in players that fit that scheme, so that's what they were doing. But they had a couple of holdover players here and there that they used pretty strategically. Some of them they brought in free agency that they were able to use, and I think some of those players are kind of the way the 49ers are going back to building this team through draft picks. I think when you look at some of the key contributors to the 49ers defense in the past, we're going to find direct correlations to the new draft picks. So this is going to be a fun one. I did some episodes where I talked about draft doppelgangers, right? Guys you could get in round one that reminded me of players in round two. So it's like, if you didn't get him in round one, you could get him in round two, or round two and round three, and vice versa. And you had players like that. And so I think that there were lots of players in the draft that were very similar that you could kind of stack upon each other. And now the 49ers did it with previous rosters and then the guys they got now to build the best possible defense as Robert Saleh and Kyle Shanahan try to reload. And hey, if it wasn't broke, right, don't fix it. So if it worked before, let's go back and get some of those guys with similar traits. And so I'm going to go through, compare and contrast what the 49ers have done and kind of connect the dots in some of these players. Now, full description here. The 49ers have a couple of draft picks that don't compare to anyone. The 49ers have never had anyone like them on the roster. So I'll make sure to point that out as well. Because when you get to certain guys, there's just no real correlation to them on the 49ers roster. That's something to remember as well. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening to an audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. And of course, if you are going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we're into the home stretch for NBA and NHL playoffs. Bet Online has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With the largest selection of odds on everything from MLB, NHL, and UFC, Bet Online remains the number one online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head on over to the Bet Online Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. Bet online, the game starts here. So I'm sure if you're like me, you've heard a couple of the comparisons already, right? It started with Chris Kasarik putting in his notes to John Lynch that CJ West reminded him of DJ Jones. Then there's been the height comparisons between stature with a guy that's going to play in the slot like Upton Stout and Kwan Williams. So those were a couple that you heard off the bat. I'm also going to bring up some more that maybe you haven't. And we're going to have a good conversation on this. But I am going to start with those comparisons because are they true? Does CJ West compare to DJ Jones? Well, first off, let's look at them in totality. So DJ Jones, when coming out of college, 6'1", 319 pounds with 32.5-inch arms and 10 1/4-inch hands. You look at CJ West, 6'1", 316 pounds. He has 9 3/4-inch hands, so a little bit smaller hands, 31 1/2-inch arms, so shorter arms. But both of these guys do have a similar stature when you're talking 6'1" and over 315 pounds. Athleticism, DJ Jones, a 5.0 40. Also, he did 25 bench press reps. Those are very impressive. You look at CJ West, and he ran a 4.95. So just a little bit of a step quicker, 28 bench press reps, which is a little bit stronger. Another thing that's important is their 10-yard split. What do they do with that? 176 for DJ Jones, 173 for CJ West. So you're looking at two players that are very close when it comes to explosiveness and athleticism and dynamics there. And so this is one of those things that I love to look at because I think there is a direct comparison when you're looking at size, playing with leverage, athleticism of the build. Now, when it comes to core strengths and the things that they're good at, that's where you're going to find the best comparisons, the things that they're really good at that are going to help. So when you're talking about DJ Jones, this is a guy that could do all the things really well when it comes to physicality, right? Just how is it going to play out on the field? He had an elite ability to get into the backfield. He had extremely quick hands coming out of college, was an effective rusher who had a combination of rare athleticism and short area lateral quickness that was going to be a problem for guys on the interior. That is something that was, you saw really well. Then he did a very good job of instinctively knowing how to, sniff out screen passes and stuff like that. You look at CJ West and what his strengths are. This is a guy that plays with exceptional leverage, just like DJ Jones. Processing speed, jumps off the tape. He's able to determine screens and those types of things. He moves laterally with great quickness, making it difficult to reach block him. These are things that I have in my notes. And so what you're getting is a comparison that is pretty close. These two guys are similar in a lot of categories. So I like this one a lot. And there's been a lot of guys who have been compared to DJ Jones. The 49ers have been looking for a DJ Jones type player since DJ Jones went to Denver, right? Kalia Davis was going to be that guy. Now, Kalia Davis was built different than DJ Jones. The things about Kalia Davis that you liked were the quick first step, right? The athletic ability, the potential to penetrate. But he didn't have the lower half that DJ Jones has. DJ West does. DJ Jones is built a lot more similar to DJ Jones. His game also very similar to DJ Jones. The penetration, the aggressiveness, the good hands, the quick hands, the football IQ, the lateral quickness, those things are definitely on display. So I think that the 49ers saw CJ West and said, hey, this is DJ Jones. This is a guy that can make an impact on our football team. So I thought that this was a really good comparison. And I think that's why the 49ers targeted him. I'm not saying he was the only one, that kind of reminded them of him. But I do think it's a direct comparison and a pretty close one when you're talking 6'1", nearly 320 pounds. Both those guys close to the same range. The difference is DJ Jones a 6th-round pick, CJ West a 4th-round pick, but CJ West has got a lot of upside. So I like both of these guys, and I think it was a great comparison for the 49ers, between these two guys. The next one up, the other one that I brought up, Upton Stout. So when you look at Kawan Williams, when he was coming out of Pittsburgh in 2014, 5'9", 185 pounds. This is a prototype nickel corner, especially at the time. So back when Kawan Williams came out, nickel corners were usually smaller because they had to be able to change direction, but thought of more in coverage. As the NFL has continued to evolve, these corners have become more difficult to just have smaller guys. They have to be physical, able to come up and help in the run. Now, the Shark, Kawan Williams, was able to do that. There were some things that he struggled with in his game, especially later in his career when it came to stopping a slot fade and things like that. But the 5'9", 185 pounds sounds a lot like Upton Stout, who goes 5'8", 181. And that's the thing, right? These guys are hyper comparable when it comes to size. Kawan Williams could move, and so can Upton Stout, 4'4", 40. So the characteristics and athleticism, Upton Stout is actually a better athlete than Kawan Williams in almost every single category. So they're alike each other when it comes to size. But some of the things you like about Kawan Williams when he came out was his ability to change direction, his ability to run with guys, his ability to stay on them. Those were his strengths. Well, guess what? We saw him play in San Francisco for a long time. Those are things that he did. He also had a nose for the football. He was able to make key interceptions when he needed to make plays. Well, guess what? Upton Stout can make plays on the football as well. He had an interception last year and is usually like Velcro on the wide receivers, but he's not afraid to come up and hit you either. So he's a guy that plays with great strength, has the ability to come up and help in run defense, which the Shark was really good at. He also can come with a blitz, very good at that. So the 49ers go out and get a Kawan Williams type player. And this is going back and looking at what Robert Saleh did in the past, because Saleh had Kawan Williams almost his entire time in San Francisco. Williams left when DeMeco Ryans took over and went to Denver. But Kawan Williams had been dealing with a lot of injuries. After that, the 49ers tried to do a bunch of different things when it came to nickel. They tried to go with a bigger nickel. They tried Jimmy Ward. They tried to draft Sam Womack, who would be kind of in the same mix, right? At 5'9", 5'10", corner 5'11". I think Womack actually was 5'10", 5'11", but a guy that could change direction. Womack was kind of that thought process, that Kawan Williams type guy. He didn't work out. De'Amar Lenore, same thing, shorter cornerback who kind of fit moving on the inside. So they have a particular idea for who they want to play nickel. They want it to be a guy that's, a little bit shorter, under 6 foot, physical at the point of attack, can come up and understand run fits, because they've tried the bigger guys. They tried the Buffalo nickel type guys, especially when they brought in Steve Wilkes. They brought in guys who were big nickels. That didn't work out. Jimmy Ward, as much as I love him, as a nickel corner, wasn't that great. He struggled in coverage. Was great in run fits, phenomenal, but struggled in coverage. So this is the type of player the 49ers go with. So we've got a guy, CJ West, who's very similar to DJ Jones. Now you've got Upton Stout, who's very similar to Kawan Williams. It's almost like the 49ers have a profile for how they plan on getting players. So that is a similarity. Those are the ones that everyone pointed out. Now, here's some that people probably haven't pointed out. When you're talking about Marquis Siegel, he's 5'11", 199 pounds, and he ran a 4.37 40 at Kansas State. When you look at who he would compare to, now this is a player that the 49ers did not draft, right? Kawan Williams wasn't drafted by the 49ers, and this player that I'm going to compare him to, they didn't draft either. Jimmy Ward out of Northern Illinois. Now, when I'm saying they didn't draft him, I don't mean the 49ers organization. I mean John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. I just want to clarify that, because he was picked by the Niners 30th overall in the 2014 NFL draft. But 5'11", 193 pounds, Siegel 5'11", 199 fits the idea of who this player is. Now, when you're talking about what things that he was really good at, Jimmy Ward, was his ability to fly around, help with the run, coming downhill, making plays, get into people with his short area quickness. That's what he was really good at. His ability to make plays on the football, interceptions. He had 11 interceptions in 3 seasons, and he had an ability to help on special teams. Now, what were the things that people talked about that he lacked? His size. It's just adequate. It's not that great. Is he a cornerback or a safety? He's built like a cornerback, but he's going to play safety potentially. Sometimes he could be a tick late in diagnosing what's going on, digesting route combinations. Those are things that he struggles with. Can he prepare like a pro? I think that there was some similar things there when you're talking about Marquise Siegel, because Marquise Siegel is an elite athlete. He drives on the football really well. When I look at what he did in college, he used his speed as a guy that could cut things off, but he's got to build like a cornerback. And people ask, is he going to play nickel corner? Is he going to play safety? Can he be a true safety? Can he be physical enough? He's wiry. He's fast. He goes and he makes plays. A very similar profile to Jimmy Ward. Now, Marquise Siegel is a better athlete than Jimmy Ward, but I think that they're very similar in build. And I think the 49ers, that's the last true free safety the 49ers had was Jimmy Ward. When he left and went to the Houston Texans, the 49ers have been void of that free safety. They have been playing with guys who are, strong safety types who have been capable of covering the deep third, but not elite at covering the deep third. And so they go out and they get their guy in the 5th round. And I think that's why they targeted Siegel, because he's very similar when you're talking about the type of player that Jimmy Ward was. I mean, Siegel had 3 interceptions last year and 3 passes defended, but he can also do like Ward does versatility-wise. That was one of the things Robert Saleh liked about doing with Jimmy Ward. He could line him up in the slot against a big tight end or a running back. He could have him cover a tight end on occasion. He could cover the deep third. He could come into the box because he was wiry and physical to make tackles. Now you got the same thing with Siegel. He can also play in the slot. He can play the deep third. You get a matchup with the running back and the running back wants to motion out, you don't have to cover him with the corner. You can cover him with Siegel. That gives you an advantage. And so the 49ers are taking what they did before, the way they built the football team, and they're saying, hey, these things really worked for us. We liked having a big interior defensive lineman that could move laterally quickly and then could penetrate with some really good quick hands. Let's do that again. CJ West, you fit the profile. We're going to get you. We like having a nickel corner that can change direction but can still come up and absolutely light somebody up when it comes to the run game. Let's go get somebody like K'Waun Williams. Boom. There is a guy that we like in Upton Stout. That doesn't mean they didn't like Jacob Parrish more, but Upton Stout is a doppelganger to Jacob Parrish. They're very similar in build, athleticism, the way that they're aggressive. So you go to the next guy, and he does remind me of K'Waun Williams, but I think he's a little bit better in coverage than K'Waun, and K'Waun was able to make a lot of plays for the 49ers. So now you're seeing it with Siegel as well, the versatility that was provided by that free safety. Right now, the 49ers don't have versatility when it comes to the safety room and what Robert Saleh likes to do. Right now, if Malik Mustafa was playing, he is your free safety, but he plays like a strong safety. Jair Brown is a strong safety who has to play free safety. So you got guys right now that I think the 49ers know are good safeties, but they're a little bit redundant. And so they needed to have a guy that could do it. They also went out in free agency, got a couple of potential free free safeties and Justin Pennick. They got another guy at safety too. I went blank on the name, and I'm not gonna be happy if I get it wrong. So I'm gonna have Richie Grant. There we go. That wasn't gonna make me happy to forget about Richie Grant, but the combination of Siegel to Jimmy Ward, I think, is pretty comparable. Now, I'm not telling you that these guys are going to produce like those guys. What I'm saying is the 49ers are honing in on a type. They're honing in on a certain player that fits their scheme, and now they're going out and they're finding guys who have similar type skills and hoping that that's going to work. And I think that's smart. That's how you build your football team. It worked before. It'll work again as long as you get the right guy. So Marquise Siegel is the guy that reminds me of Jimmy Ward, and I think he reminds the 49ers of Jimmy Ward as well. Now, one of the most interesting ones is Mykel Williams. So Mykel Williams is a guy who played 4-5 tech, which is like a lot of 3-4 defenses. That's a defensive end on the inside, but how does it translate to playing on the outside in the wide 9? He can't be a direct comparison to maybe anyone, or can he? Now, I think the first comparison is let's compare him to a guy like Eric Armstead. And I talked about this in a previous episode. Armstead went a little bit heavier, and I appreciate it. I can't remember who it was. I'm going to have to give you credit. I thanked you in the comments for pointing this out. I said Armstead went over 300 pounds, but actually he went 291. So he was a little bit smaller. You've got a guy like Mikael Williams going 260. But the reason that is the direct comparison initially is because Armstead was a guy who played outside on base downs and then moved inside on obvious pass downs in 2019. That is something that the 49ers talked about with Eric Armstead, but they also talked about with Mikael Williams that they're going to move him in on obvious pass downs to rush, that they like that dynamic because just like Eric Armstead, he's too athletic for the offensive guards inside, but still has enough power to be able to hold up and still get a bull rush because he has an elite bull rush ability. So I think those guys have some comparisons. Now, Mikael Williams is very much more athletic than Eric Armstead. Armstead ran a 5.140 coming out as a 5 tech from Oregon, where Mikael Williams ran a 4.77. So athleticism, definitely Mikael Williams. That's why he's a better base down defensive end than Eric Armstead. Armstead, sometimes that would be a weakness of his. So you've got that direct comparison between those two. Now they're both, very long arms. Armstead was one of those guys that definitely had long arms at 33 inches. Mikael Williams' arms actually longer. Big hands for Armstead at 10 and a half, 10 and 1/4 for Mikael Williams. Those things are similar as well. You talk about athleticism, the 5'1", the 175 split for Armstead, a 34-inch vert, which is very impressive, including 24 bench press reps. But when you look over at Mikael Williams, he's still got all that athleticism as well. So these two guys in that regard are pretty much the same. But I would like to throw in there that maybe the direct comparison is not Eric Armstead, but actually another former 49er. And I had actually heard John Lynch bring him up in a press conference where he said that they got a certain type of player that they ultimately liked. And he referred to Charles Omenihu. And when you look at Charles Omenihu, 6'5", 280, that is kind of the thing with Mikael Williams right now. Now, when it comes to Omenihu, he has 36-inch arms, which is just ridiculous. Mikael Williams, almost 35, is tremendous. But he was more athletic than Eric Armstead, right? Closer to what you're going to get from Mikael Williams. And I thought that was a pretty good comparison when you talked about body type. Now, I do believe Mikael Williams is more athletic, but Charles Omenihu is one of the guys that was absolutely jacked, right? Coming out of college, he is the original, step off the bus, the elite body type look. And I think that's what you're getting from Mikael Williams as well. The mixture of power, but still enough speed to be able to do some things. He is one of those guys that his film said he lacked instincts and consistency when it came to being a pass rusher. And I think that is something people think about Mikael Williams as well. So it's interesting when you look at how these two are built. I think these two are very similar. The interesting part, Robert Saleh never coached Charles Omenihu. Charles Omenihu was a guy they picked up when a trade with the Houston Texans when DeMeco Ryans was in charge of the defense. But I think this is a direct comparison to who the 49ers were looking for when they were comparing Mikael Williams. I think he's got the ability to set the edge like Armstead, but a lot of the physical traits match Charles Omenihu and who Omenihu is. And the versatility, right, to play outside but also move inside, Omenihu showed that a lot. And I think that's what they're looking at with Mikael Williams. I think they think he's Charles Omenihu with more upside. And I think that could be a really direct comparison. That's the modern day defensive end that they're looking for. More athletic, not quite as big as Armstead, because Armstead, they eventually moved him in, but that ability to set the edge consistently. And I think that's where you're getting the comparison and how they're building this team to Charles Omenihu. And if you listen to John Lynch, he kind of said that as well. So Armstead, yes, a little bit, but Omenihu, I think even more. And I think they're expecting more out of Mikael Williams than they got out of Charles Omenihu. But Omenihu has been a guy that's been very important to the Kansas City Chiefs. He signed a big contract with them. So he's another guy. So let's look at linebacker as well. Nick Martin. And, you're going to get comparisons right away to Dre Greenlaw. And so I thought, let's take a look at Dre Greenlaw and those comparisons for Nick Martin. Nick Martin, 6 foot, 221. Dre Greenlaw, 5'11 and a half, 237. So Nick Martin just barely taller than Greenlaw. But when you look at weight, Greenlaw had more weight on him. which was interesting because they used to say that Drake Greenlaw was undersized as well. So that's, basically interesting between the two. Both of them are hyper fast and athletic. So that's something that both of them did well. Now, we do know that since Robert Saleh has left, he was able to go get a guy like Jamie Sherwood, and Sherwood went about 220 pounds. Now, he was 6'2", but he went 220 pounds. So if you're looking for another comparison, that is it. Now, Nick Martin is way faster than Sherwood, who only ran a 4.7, but that shows you, right? You don't have to have elite speed to play for Robert Saleh, but if you have it, it's really going to help. So I'm kind of going between a couple of comparisons here because I think it's interesting to hone in on who Robert Saleh likes to have at linebacker. But I want to go through some of the things about Drake Greenlaw. When you look at the analysis for him and who he was as a potential will linebacker coming into the league. And so I found this overview of him by Lance Zierlein in NFL analysis, and they said this: number one, they think he's a round 7 priority free agent. What do you think people have been saying about Nick Martin? That he was a round 7 priority free agent. That's just how it is. They think that this guy should have been undrafted, Nick Martin. And they thought the same thing about Drake Greenlaw. Then Greenlaw goes in the 5th round. Now, Nick Martin went in the 3rd round. Now, I had a 5th round grade on Nick Martin, a lot of the reason because of injury. I thought the 49ers wouldn't take him until day 3, and I thought that would move him down a round. So I would have had a 4th round grade on him, so that one's not too crazy to me. So this is the overview of what they wrote about Drake Greenlaw. Run and chase 4-3 will linebacker with the quickness to flow ahead of blocks to the football, but a lack of willful aggression to fire downhill and put his stamp on games. It'll be difficult for Greenlaw to make a living with nothing more than cleanup tackles on his own side of the ball, so he needs to turn the speed and athleticism into weapons of disruption. His speed and athleticism give him a chance to carve out a career as a special teams ace and nickel cover talent. Hilarious. Because we know that Drake Greenlaw was able to fire downhill, and he put his stamp on every single game he ever played in. So it's always interesting when you talk about these things. But when you look at Nick Martin and some of the things that people have been saying about him, it has been very similar, right? They look at the weaknesses that they said he had. Undersized frame, struggled to stack and shed at the pro level, over-aggressive in pursuit, limited sample size to be a full-time starter, needs more time to adjust to sophisticated NFL blocking schemes, too often relies on athleticism, needs to develop more patience. These are not things that are crazy different from what they said about the weaknesses of Drake Greenlaw. Look small, play small, rare to trigger downhill and attack the backfield, too much hesitation. He gets wired to blocks rather than playing off them, needs to get better at eluding blocks, low average pop as a tackler, doesn't have desired football IQ, gets caught out of position. These are all things. Good athlete. This is a former scout. Good athlete, former safety. He runs well, but I don't think he's tough enough to trust him in a game. He better be really good on special teams unless he finds more dog inside of him. Well, the dog was there, and the dog is there for Nick Martin as well. So I thought that it was very interesting when you're looking at these two guys. Now, they are similar in the fact that when they see it, they absolutely go and they light you up. Nick Martin is a beast, and this dude's going to light people up when he hits them. Now, there are some natural question marks when it comes to Nick Martin. He's going to have to rely on his speed and rely on his athleticism and his instincts to beat some of those blocks. That's reality. That's the same for Drake Greenlaw. That's the same for Fred Warner. That's the same for Jamie Sherwood. That's the same for T. Winters. The guys who fit within the system need to operate with speed. But what you're getting is, even though he's not quite as big as Drake Greenlaw, you're getting a guy that has a similar skill set. He's a guy that can run sideline to sideline. He's a guy that can avoid offensive linemen and make tackles. When he reads it and he goes downhill, he lights you up. So those are similar traits. You look at Sherwood, and it's not that much different. Jamie Sherwood is the same sort of thing. He's got good angles. That's something that both Drake Greenlaw and Nick Martin have. He's a really good put-together athlete that flies around, good body control. Those are all things. Now, what were his weaknesses? Inconsistency getting off tackles. Can be a step slow to react. Needs to improve his footwork and balance and coverage. Not an explosive player. So you see the things that you were getting from all three guys, this is a type for Robert Saleh. You go back and you look at Azeez Al-Shire, you're going to get a very similar read when it comes to Nick Martin and what you're getting from Dre Greenlaw. So I think when you look at the 49ers draft picks, you have some really similarities to former players as they go hone in on what worked before and what will work now in today's NFL. So they went out and they got a guy that was very similar to DJ Jones they could put on the inside. They went and got a linebacker that was similar to guys like Azeez Al-Shire, Dre Greenlaw, and Jamie Sherwood that could play linebacker. It's not identical, but a lot of the similarities that you love. They went and got Upton Stout that plays the position like Kawan Williams, maybe with a little bit more athleticism and ability to cover. They went and got a safety, right, that reminds you of Jimmy Ward. It was a very good job of going locating. Mikael Williams, who's like Charles Omenihu, who's got that upside, maybe more pass rush than Omenihu, but Omenihu's a double-digit sack guy. That's who Mikael Williams could be in the NFL. I think it was a really good way. Now, if you notice, I did not talk about Alfred Collins, and here's why. There is nobody that the 49ers have had that reminds me of Alfred Collins that the 49ers, Robert Saleh and them had, or anyone that was a holdover. No one. There is nobody that the Jets had. I think the closest is probably Kinlaw, but even then, Kinlaw is not Alfred Collins because Kinlaw was a good run stopper who had some pass rush upside, but not as good of a run stopper as Collins. I think Alfred Collins, I know a lot of people have said it, when it comes to size, weight, athleticism, is very reminiscent of Chris Jones. Now, Chris Jones had a lot more upside when it came to pass rush, and I don't want to put that on Alfred Collins, but I think he's a little bit of an anomaly. This dude is a freak of nature. I love the fact they went with somebody big and aggressive who doesn't remind us of anyone, but they needed to improve that one tech position. I think they did it. This was a really fun look at how they approached the draft and how they had got guys who were similar in comparison, to who they have. Now, when you look at the corners, it's different. I talked about they changed that a little bit as they've been going through their drafting, especially for outside. But if you look at what Robert Saleh had in New York, a guy like DJ Reed and Diamond Lenore and Renardo Green are not too far apart as far as similarities. So you can continue to find some of those connections as you continue to build. And so I think it's a lot of fun. Let me know who you guys think. Are these comparisons working for you? What do you guys think about this approach of kind of going out and getting guys who fit the scheme and making it similar? I'm really curious. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. If you're listening to audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, give it a 5-star rating. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.